Hello and good day. Hi.
Hi.
Let's talk
Hi.
about let's talk about flies.
Naturally.
Let's do it. Let's talk about flies.
Yeah.
Uh, of, one of our favorite concepts, one of your favorite concepts is the fly on the wall. I read the book by Dr. Mischel, the Marshmallow Test. Marshmallow Test is about a psychologist back in, I think it was in the 60s, and he got just a handful of kids, put them in a room, and told them if you don't eat the marshmallow or whatever treat he had different treats, but if you don't eat the marshmallow for however long, when I come back, if you were able to control yourself, I'll give you two marshmallows. And and I'll refer back to that a lot, honestly. That's one of my
Mhm.
favorites. And it's all about delayed gratification. And the kids that were able to delay gratification and get their two marshmallows actually were followed. He followed all the kids, and the ones that were
That
able
sounds
to do
creepy.
that.
That was part of the research project to see how they did throughout their life.
Oh, he wasn't following them around. Okay, yeah. So he was, yeah, keeping track of them
Yeah.
and kept in touch with them. And the ones that were able to delay gratification ended up being much more successful in life because they learned how to delay gratification to finish tests, do their homework, do the job, get things done. And so they ended up being much more effective. The rates of like divorce and alcoholism and that kind of stuff was much lower. It wasn't like the only thing, of course, but it was much lower. So in this study, he goes into lots of strategies for controlling your self, really, to control yourself.
Hmm.
And that's what the fly on the wall is all about. It's actually just a strategy. It's a visual strategy, and it's an amazing part of being human. It's an extremely complex thing that we have, where we can actually, in our own mind, like almost as if we are watching a movie of ourselves, like a fly on the wall. It's kind of like, so you can picture a camera in the room and recording what you're doing as if you're an actor in a movie,
Hmm.
or you can pretend like you're a fly on the wall. And so La likes to pretend like she's a fly on the wall, and whenever she's feeling down, whenever she's feeling rough, whenever she starts behaving in a way that she knows she ought not to, she just feels off.
Just not feeling okay.
Yeah, you can actually step outside of the self for a moment and, yeah, and
Hmm.
actually observe yourself and make more objective observation. And that's the goal.
Hmm.
And so that's a strategy that Dr. Michel talked about in his book. And I explained it to Law once, and she started using it, and she was like, "Well, this works really well."
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm extremely visual, and it helps me to explain things that are like in my head in a visual way. And a lot of times it makes you laugh to be like, okay, that's very visual. So the fly on
yeah,
the
it
wall worked.
works.
That worked perfectly for me. Actually, even the marshmallow test itself, like that resonated in a way because I could picture that, of why I struggle with basically delayed gratification. Not having a lot of hope for the future, because that research project shows, part of that was the kids that didn't come from, like, didn't trust their environment, didn't trust basically. So yeah, like, this guy's actually going to come back and give me a second. Yeah, right. I'm going to take what I can get while I can get it. Right. And so they didn't
Mhm.
have hope for the future. And those kids came from like more broken kind of environments. And so learning about that was really a big thing for me. And so, yeah, like for someone to unfold that part, like, the onion opens and all of its smells and ugliness, ugly crying. But like for that to resonate and really feel like, wow, okay, vulnerable makes so now what? So fly on the wall was the perfect visual representation to be like, okay, so I feel like this. I don't know why. Do I have to feel like this? Like, do I need to feel not okay? And that's, Dave was really good at helping me to stop in the moment and be like, look around, like, you're safe. look around. There's your kids, like they're in the room fighting, but they're okay. Like they're here, they're breathing, they're safe, like they're look at me, I'm here. And so being able to kind of like make those objective. Now I in the middle of that moment, I'm not necessarily like the fly on the wall per se, but that's the same tactic of him pointing those things out to where now after a couple of years I can be like, don't really, and mine's always right here, like I feel it in my chest. I don't really feel okay, I don't know why, but then I can put myself in that same outside of my sense of self and be like, let me just start taking some data. Okay, things are okay. Like we have food, we have a roof over our heads, there's love in our home, it's good. May not feel okay, but let's start with that. So yeah, that fly on the wall and marshmallow test were both huge.
Yeah, so you started broaching the subject of um, trust, trusting in the future. And for this particular session, I don't want to go into details on that, but that is very useful information.
Yeah.
And
Another time, maybe. I don't
yeah,
know. Maybe that's too deep.
well, it's just more details, but wanted to expound a little bit more upon why this is important on a more technical level now, because you're talking about your experiences with it. And what I want to do is address the fact that the the process of becoming a fly on the wall, what it does is it helps us to delay gratification, as in it helps us to take a look at ourselves objectively. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to help everybody. We're not trying, we're successfully helping people learn how to change behaviors.
Right.
And before you can change your family's behavior, you must learn how to change your own behavior, period. Like, you don't show up to a class or to anything to fix the other person. You show up to fix yourself so you can learn how to fix the other person.
Yeah.
And you never really fix anybody. You're
Yeah.
always,
yeah.
you can always work on yourself. Now, habits are what we can really deem to be the enemy, more or less. Habits are either good or bad depending on the circumstances. There's no, and habits in general are neutral. It's the circumstance that really changes things. Like when kids are introduced or when a spouse is introduced to our lives, our old habits have to change. Like, I can't maintain the same toilet seat up habit that I used. That was a habit for years. I was a bachelor for years. Didn't matter. Well, suddenly it matters all of a sudden. So I have to change my habits because one person in particular thought it was a huge deal, so then I got to change it, right? So, so, so habits are exactly what they sound like. Habits. They're automatic. So becoming a fly on the wall puts us in a circumstance, in a situation where we can actually watch what we're doing, because most of our habits we're not even aware of doing them. Like, I'm not like, it's like, what'd you have for dinner last Tuesday? No one knows. You know what I mean? No one cares. It's because it's a habit. But if there's something that's different in your life, or if you're like mindful of it, if you watched a specific game, a football game or something, or you were engaged in a particular meal with somebody who had like a really cool conversation, then you remember that.
Right.
But when you are screaming at your kid, but you don't realize you're screaming at your kid, or when you're feeding your kids bad behavior without realizing it, or you're giving your kid attention, or you're giving your spouse this dirty look without even intending to give him or her the dirty look, then you are unaware. And how in the world can you change your behavior unless you can become a fly on the wall and be able to make objective decisions? So a habit also, and I'm getting even more detailed and more in depth on the technical stuff because it's important and it's good to understand. The more knowledge we have, the more you know, the better. So the next thing is understanding that habits are a form of gratification also. So habits are a form of gratification. Like, we feel uneasy if we don't perform our habits. So we have to learn how to delay that gratification. And that's the reason why we're talking about delayed gratification now. You have to learn how to be able to step outside of the self and be able to look at yourself from an outside perspective and see your habit that you're engaged in, that you get such satisfaction out of. A lot of it is, let's just say, for example, the way you talk to somebody, like the way you argue or the way you snub somebody, that's a habit. If you do the same, that's what you've been doing since you were a kid. Yeah, you were a kid, you've been doing it since you were a kid. You watched your parents do it. Now you do it. You get a certain satisfaction out of doing that. Obviously, you wouldn't keep doing it. And it's feeding the problem. And you have to learn how to stop doing that. So you have to learn how to delay the gratification. And that's why I'm going so much into that.
Well, when a family comes, not to get super technical with it too, but it's the exact same thing. When a family comes and they've got this kid that has like a behavior problem, right? And they're maybe even like close to out of control with it, or going to lose a placement. That's what we're able to do, is just provide a little bit of like objectivity out of the self, out of that family unit. Because when you live in the home, when you're in that family unit, and like your mom or your dad, or you're together all the time, and you got the laundry, and you've got the homework, and you've got to make sure people are fed and they get to bed on time and they're showered, and there's all these dynamics that get thrown into it. It makes it hard to be able to take that sense of that step outside of yourself. So it's the exact same stuff, that if a family is really struggling, to just be like, hey, let's look at this pattern of habitual behavior that is continuing to occur, and then we work on changing what's supporting that habit.
Yeah. I mean, everyone has the tools. And you could take the information we're giving you right now, and you could totally revolutionize everything in your life. And I believe that wholeheartedly. But we help people. It's kind of like you get the tools, but then curve. You don't need necessarily, but it's a whole lot easier when someone helps you apply it, and someone from the outside perspective says, okay, so now this is why this is happening. I hear what you're saying, Dave. I get that a lot, actually. I hear what you're saying, but how does that apply? So you said this, and then that's how it applies. And they go, right. Oh, and then they are able to make the changes. So that's the way it works.
It keeps it, we help shorten the trial and error. The learning curve is much easier than like, okay, I tried this. Oop, that didn't go over well at all.
And time is valuable.
It is.
So
thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah, so that's a wrap for that one. And we'll keep on coming up with more good stuff. Subscribe and all that good stuff,